The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
50 years ago, the Great Lakes were a polluted mess. And so the U.S. and Canada came together to do something about that. Tonight, in partnership with the Council of the Great Lakes region, we'll take stock of what a half-century of that historic bilateral pact has accomplished. Also, the most recent report from the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, stood out for some positive news it delivered. We'll speak to two of the authors about next steps. It's Thursday, April 14th, and that's next on the agenda. It is not an overstatement to call the Great Lakes, each one individually and all of them together, wonders to behold and an unparalleled resource that constitute an astonishing 20% of the Earth's surface fresh water. But half a century ago, they faced a clear and present danger from pollution and environmental degradation. Enter the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, signed on April 15, 1972. With us now on how that ushered in a new era in Canada-U.S. oversight of the lakes, we welcome, in Vancouver, British Columbia, Kelsey Leonard, Canada Research Chair and Assistant Professor in the Faculty of Environment at the University of Waterloo and a member of the International Joint Commission's Great Lakes Water Quality Board. In the nation's capital, another member of the IJC's Great Lakes Water Quality Board, there's Mark Fisher, who is President and CEO of the Council of the Great Lakes region, which TVO is proud to partner with over the coming months on issues involving the lakes and this anniversary. And in Mississauga, Ontario, Gail Kranzberg, Professor of Engineering and Public Policy at McMaster University and a former Director of the Great Lakes Regional Office of the IJC. And it's great to have you three back on TVO for this important anniversary. Let's just, before we start our conversation, get some facts and background on the record here to get us started, because the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement between Canada and the United States was first signed April 15, 1972, identifies shared priorities and actions needed to restore and protect the Great Lakes. It commits both countries to restore and maintain the chemical, physical, and biological integrity of the waters of the Great Lakes. The agreement was updated in 1978, 1987, and 2012. And if we want to get in our little time machine here, let's take a look at Prime Minister Trudeau, no, not this one, his dad, and President Richard Nixon at the signing ceremony.
A marked change of mood inside for the signing of the Great Lakes Cleanup Agreement in the chandeliered Confederation Room on Parliament Hill. It culminates 8 years of effort to reverse the trend to slow death in some of the lakes. Today, it's predicted that in 5 years, people will once more swim in the now polluted areas of Lakes Ontario and Erie, and trout will abound again. Symbolically, the lakes have been a grim reminder of all the terrible things that have been happening to the North American environment. So the signing, for symbolic reasons and much more, was hailed here as a milestone in the world battle against pollution.
Gail, to you first. How groundbreaking was that moment?
Oh, enormously. The two nations at that point in time were not necessarily particularly amicable with each other, and yet the dangers posed to the Great Lakes from the turn of the 19th century into the mid-20th century made it impractical to ignore it. You know, we dumped all sorts of chemicals and sewage into the Great Lakes because they're so vast. We thought that wouldn't do any harm, and yet we had so much waste, sewage waste, untreated waste, partially treated waste, that we had plant growth, algal growth that was so enormous in Lake Erie, it was choking the lake. A little biology, when the algae decompose, they actually rob the bacteria, use up oxygen in the water. And so in the 60s, there was a big media declaration that Lake Erie was dead because of massive fish kills. Well, the lake wasn't dead. A lot of the fish were dead. And as a consequence, with enough pressure from the environmental movement that was actually born in the 1960s from Rachel Carson's famous Silent Spring, the governments of the day started paying great attention to environmental pollution and damage. And interestingly, when Pierre Trudeau signed the agreement, I want to quote something that he said at the time. He said that the agreement is it promises to restore to a wholesome condition an immense area which through greed and indifference has been permitted to deteriorate disgracefully. And to have that kind of language coming from our prime minister and agreed to by the president of the United States was truly astonishing. And the evolution of that agreement over time, from the phosphorus problems of that period, of that era, to persistent toxic substances, to Great Lakes geographic locations called areas of concern, and now with climate change and invasive species, it's just a call to action. It still remains a promise, but to have the two national leaders make a promise to bring back to wholesomeness this vast potential beauty was really, truly remarkable.
Well, Mark, maybe I can get you to follow up on that in this regard. And Gail referred to the fact that the two leaders of the two countries were not getting along particularly well. Note to the control room, I'm going to quote what Richard Nixon called Pierre Trudeau back then, so have the beeping machine standing by. He referred to him on the tapes that were later discovered in the Nixon White House office as that asshole. So for those two gentlemen to have signed this deal, again, Mark, in your judgment, how big a deal?
It was a big deal, and we have to remember that this collaboration, this partnership actually started back with the Boundary Waters Treaty of 1909, which was then signed between the United States and Great Britain on behalf of Canada. And under Article 4, there's a clause that says, "Thou shalt not pollute boundary waters to the injury of health or property on the other side." And over that period of time, between 1909 and the 60s, there were a number of studies actually that were undertaken and look at the health of various aspects of the Great Lakes. But the seminal work, referenced by the International Joint Commission that was done in 1964 at the request of both countries, looked at a lot of the issues that Gail has highlighted for us. So nutrients and potentials of oil spills, radioactivity because of nuclear testing and the increase in nuclear power in the Great Lakes region. There were a number of issues that were concerning both parties at the time. And it's that reference and the recommendations from the IJC that asked the parties to put in place remedial action plans, significant plans, really led to the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement in 1972.
Kelsey, as you look back 50 years later, how much of that deal back then stands up today?
Well, these types of international agreements are very much also about the way in which we enforce. It's about implementation. Words on a page only go so far. And so when I look back at the agreement in 1972, the big gaping omission is the fact that Indigenous nations, First Nations, tribal nations, and Métis peoples who have been the stewards of this portion of the Great Lakes and region of the world for millennia were not signatories to the agreement. Even in the context that was mentioned earlier of the 1909 Boundary Waters Treaty, they also were not signatories to that treaty. So sometimes the 1909 Boundary Waters Treaty and the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, although very seminal in the context of U.S. and Canadian political development in the context of water governance, are seen as these sort of first beacons of international, binational coordination. They actually aren't the first. The first are the treaties and agreements that the Crown, Canada, and the United States signed with Indigenous nations in the region. And so I call those the first transboundary water treaties. And so when we look back and we even start to reconcile at 50 years, how well have we been doing? It largely comes back to that question of enforcement and implementation. The Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, the 1909 Boundary Waters Treaty, the treaties with Indigenous nations are only as good as we as citizens make them through our enforcement and responsibility ethic towards their implementation.
Now, Mark, that is an omission that took place 50 years ago. And I guess you could argue they didn't know any better back then to include Indigenous groups, which one hopes they would today. Is that a mistake that can be fixed today?
It absolutely can be fixed, and it needs to be fixed. I think, as Kelsey rightly pointed out, when we look at the history of our Indigenous peoples in this region in North America, they in fact had their own covenants well before the 1972 Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, the District 1 spoon. These are sacred waters for many people, and it is a glaring omission. And I think if we are looking to update the agreement going forward, we absolutely need to find a way of including First Nations, Métis, and tribes in that framework agreement. They are an important party and partner that needs to be involved in any agreement going forward, in my view.
All right, having said that, we do know that it was Canada and the United States 50 years ago that made this agreement. And Gail, on balance, would you say 50 years later that each side has held up its end of the agreement? And how well have they?
Well, Pierre Trudeau said it was a promise, and it's nothing more than a promise. To Kelsey's point, it's words on a page. There have been some really good things that have happened. I mean, we all know that there's been for a long time, phosphorus has been banned from laundry detergents. That happened because of the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement. Most people don't recognize that. That major policy shift in reducing phosphorus loads to our lakes was a consequence of the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement. So there's a definite plus. But there's a lot of things that have not worked well, or have I'd say more of a patchy outcome, like the remedial action plans that Mark just mentioned a moment ago for these Great Lakes areas of concern. You know, these were invented in 1987. Actually, the concept was 1985. So 35 plus years later, of the 43 locations, nine have been declared restored to a healthy system.
So it's a long way to go.
Not great progress, but that's been accelerated only in recent years because of a renewed U.S. commitment to the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative under the Barack Obama's administration. That was renewed again under Trump, renewed presently now under President Biden. That's infusing a lot of money to correct and repair and remediate. What we're not really good at is preventing and protecting the excellence that's there. So this is I sense that we're in a catch-up mode. We're catching up, and a good example of catching up is back in 1971 when Dr. Seuss wrote the Lorax, which was industrial, irresponsible use of land and dumping into lakes and chasing the fish out to find waters that are not so stinky and slimy, just like Lake Erie, which he put in his book originally. Well, some 10 years later, that line came out because Lake Erie had actually recovered well from nutrient inputs. What we're good at doing is where engineers can solve a problem at the end of a pipe. What we're not good at doing is collective responsibility, to Kelsey's point, on stewardship, on ownership. And that's been a failing. The 2012 protocol started to address that by being including that all of this that Canada and the United States are intending to do would be in collaboration with First Nations, Métis, tribes, municipalities, provinces, states, and others. And that's a good step forward towards a better governance system. But we still got knocking at the door in Chicago, Asian carp ready to come into the lakes and destroy our fishery.
Well, let's hold off on that because I want to get to some of the wins first. We'll talk about some of the challenges still to come. But Kelsey, there have been wins over the last 50 years. What's the biggest win in your opinion?
Well, I think the biggest win, in my opinion, again, connected to the recognition of Indigenous sovereignty in the region, is largely with the recommitments in 2012. In 2012, we saw the addition to the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement of designated representative roles for tribes, First Nations, and Métis leadership to have a seat within the water quality agreement advisory boards, including like the one that I sit on, the Great Lakes Water Quality Advisory Board, as well as the Science Advisory Boards. And so that is something that has also lent itself to those 2012 recommitments, where we also saw the integration of traditional ecological knowledge being a listed area for the agreement to include in its science-based approaches to management of the lakes. And so now we see in 2022, the IPCC reports recognizing the foundational worth of Indigenous knowledge to addressing our climate crisis. We see the United States and the White House coming out with guidance on all federal agencies utilizing Indigenous traditional ecological knowledge in their work and in the way in which they think about science and science-based decision-making. And so I kind of think that 2012 recommitment was largely very instrumental in beckoning in a shift that we are seeing towards valuing Indigenous science and knowledge. And that wasn't necessarily done by the sort of good nature altruism of the US and Canadian governments. It was led by Indigenous leaders who, despite not being signatories to the 1972 agreement, have never abrogated their stewardship and conservation practices towards the lakes. They have maintained really robust scientific enterprises and restoration efforts throughout the lake region. And a lot of what we see in terms of healthy ecosystems across the lakes are a testament to those Indigenous nation activities and science-based led efforts. So I think that was really a highlight and an area where we're going to continue to see future growth.
Okay, good to have that on the record. Mark, how about you? In your view, 50 years of wins, what would top your list?
Well, I think back to some of the points that Gail had raised earlier. We had a nutrient problem related to phosphorus. In many ways, we have fixed it. There are a number of different toxic hotspots where I think we've been making a concerted effort and cleaning up and restoring those areas. I think we've done a much better job at controlling, let's say, sewage contamination going into the Great Lakes from outdated wastewater systems. But as we look at those problems, they're old problems, but they're also become new problems. So if you look at nutrients in the Great Lakes, obviously we're dealing with that from a farming standpoint. When you look at our wastewater treatment systems, yes, we've fixed sewage flowing into the Great Lakes by and large, but we're also seeing new challenges in terms of treatment issues, whether it's pharmaceuticals or other contaminants that are able to get through our wastewater systems. And so some of our past wins are also becoming new challenges as well as these issues evolve over time.
Well, let's pick up on new challenges. Gail just talked about the Asian carp problem that we've done programs on here before. Gail, you've been on talking about that. The remediation efforts have been running behind schedule. What would you like to add to that list, Mark, in terms of things that ought to be working better by this point but aren't?
Well, funding is a big issue. I think Gail has rightly addressed the fact that the United States, through its Great Lakes Restoration Initiative over the last decade plus, has spent well in excess of $3 billion in cleaning up and accelerating restoration and identifying real issues and tackling real issues like climate change and invasive species and what have you. They're spending now roughly $500 million a year between Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, the new infrastructure bill. Canada, unfortunately, through its Freshwater Action Plan, which just sunsetted on March 31st, was spending $75 million for the entirety of the country for freshwater protection, $9 million annually just for the Great Lakes. So we are being eclipsed by the United States when it comes to funding and our focus on some of these priorities. Really disappointed that the budget last week did not address any of these issues in a meaningful way. There was some investment in, for example, organizations like the Great Lakes Fisheries Commission, which is great, but that investment is actually paying back a past debt that Canada owed to the Great Lakes Fisheries Commission because it never paid its dues to the organization. So it's great that some of these issues are being corrected, but Canada needs to be really stepping up in a much more meaningful way to invest in restoration and to be investing in Great Lakes science, because it is being eclipsed right now by its partner to the south.
Kelsey, what would you add to that list?
Well, right now what we're seeing as well being considered in Parliament is an environmental racism bill. And that bill really needs to be passed because it has real implications for the ability to implement the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement and to the restoration of areas of concern, along with the remedial action plans that were mentioned earlier. A majority of First Nations, Tribal Nations, and Métis communities live within 10 kilometers of an area of concern. So their traditional territories and waters that surround and are inclusive of the Great Lakes have been highly degraded, not only for human beneficial uses, which is largely how we determine whether or not an area has been highly toxic or then listed as an area of concern, but also for the health and ecosystem itself, right? The health of the lake, the health of the ecosystem itself. We need to move beyond in our current way in which we address the climate crisis to, one, ensure that human beings, yes, have their rights met in terms of addressing environmental racism and not being unduly disproportionately burdened by toxic environments. But we also need to ensure that for nature itself. And what we're seeing right now is largely the exact opposite, because the types of standards we put in place, like beneficial use impairments, are based on human beneficial uses, not on the natural world uses of those ecosystems.
Okay, Gail, what gets added to your list?
Well, I want to just address something slightly different from what Kelsey said, in that I think half of the beneficial ways that the lakes can be used to the benefit are for the benefit of people, swimming, drinking, fishing, eating, but also to the benefit of fish and wildlife. They should be free of tumors. They should have habitat. They should have thriving natural populations and communities. So that's just a piece there that I think that is a complicated piece, but I think is an interesting one. It seems to me that what we really are looking towards, for example, is, to Mark's point, the science in the Great Lakes has really fallen back as compared to the ocean science. The IJC right now, through the Science Advisory Board that I co-chair with my American counterpart, we put together what we think is a decadal science strategy. What kind of vessels, what kind of equipment do we need to really measure what's going on in the lakes? Because if you don't measure it, you can't manage it. And this is about a thriving economy. Mark can speak volumes on the economic value of the Great Lakes region. If it were a nation state, it would be one of the largest in the world. You can't manage that economy if you can't protect that environmental asset that you have. And the science needed to do that has fallen way behind. The other thing I think that I would emphasize is what Mark just said a moment ago. We're investing $8 million a year. The U.S. is investing $400, $500 million a year. There's something very wrong there. There was a consortium that went after Environment and Climate Change Canada as the lead, saying, here's the strategy for the next 10 years, $100 million a year to make sure our beaches are open, to make sure we deal with persistent toxic substances, to make sure that our communities become more resilient to a changing climate, harmful algal blooms that we're seeing now in Lake Ontario. We're even seeing algae problems in Lake Superior, which we've never seen before. So the science is very complicated. The climate specter over everything tends to exacerbate what we knew about the lakes. And in fact, in 2006 or so, a bunch of Great Lakes scientists said, the lakes are at a tipping point. We can't predict where they're going to be anymore. They're so out of kilter. We need the science, really, and we need that investment in science to protect the asset that is a social, cultural, and economic boom to the region.
Well, Mark, governments indicate their priorities by budgets. The federal budget came out last week. Did you see anything in there that made you happy in terms of what Gail was just talking about?
Yeah, unfortunately, not really, Steve. Again, when we look at the investments in the Great Lakes Fisheries Commission, it's a positive investment. There's going to be a year-over-year investment, but a big part of that is actually paying back a past debt that was owed by Canada because it didn't pay its dues to the Great Lakes Fisheries Commission for over a decade. So that obviously is positive, but it's also not something to pat ourselves on the back about. The Freshwater Action Plan, which sunsetted on March 31st, they've made a one-year investment, $19.6 million for this year, but that's going to be spread across 8 major water basins in this country, where the Great Lakes is just one of them. So there's actually going to be less money for the Great Lakes, not more, than what we've seen under a woefully underfunded Freshwater Action Plan going forward. And, obviously there's a positive investment in the experimental lakes area where we do a lot of freshwater science. And that science is positive. But I think in the aggregate, Steve, Canada needs to be doing a lot more when it comes to investing in not only restoration in the Great Lakes and Great Lakes science, but protecting its freshwater resources right across this country. And so I was really disappointed with the federal budget last week, and particularly since it's the 50th anniversary of the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement that Prime Minister Trudeau Sr. signed 50 years ago.
Can I just follow up with you on one thing there? You said we didn't pay our bills for a decade. How do we get away with not paying a bill that we have promised to pay as it relates to the Great Lakes, which are, never mind, all the aesthetic reasons why you'd want to keep that system clean, it's a huge part of our economic future. How exactly do we get away with not paying our bills?
Well, it's been a long-standing irritant with the United States and Canada as it relates to the Great Lakes Fisheries Commission. It's one of those issues and irritants that doesn't hit prime time. But it's there. It's been known, and thankfully through the last budget, that past mistake has been corrected. But that's just one of many issues where I think we need to really look at where Canada is in the conversation. And a lot of people think that the United States is falling behind on the environment. As it relates to the Great Lakes, they're well ahead of Canada.
One of the things that we try to do on this program, because I know I hear from people who say, this is all just far too big for me as an individual to have any impact over. So, Kelsey, can I bring you in at this point and say, if you're watching this or listening to this right now, and you're one individual who cares about the Great Lakes, what's one thing you could do to do your part?
I think the biggest answer I have for that question, and I tell my students this and others that I work with, is restore your connection to water, restore your connection to the Great Lakes. And that often comes from, as small as knowing where your water comes from. When you turn on that tap, how is it actually getting to you? And what are the implications as well when you have the disbursement of your wastewater? Where is that wastewater going? And how is it implicating the health of the Great Lakes or the potential deterioration of the Great Lakes? And I would just say too, that every individual has a responsibility and a duty of care in terms of the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement. Our nations signed this agreement, both the United States and Canada. And so if you see yourself as a Canadian citizen or a United States citizen, then you have an obligation to see through the fulfillment of this agreement. And you do that through your civic duty of voting, of hosting town halls and asking the hard questions to our leadership that are in government, to ask them, how are they dedicating resources, as Mark mentioned earlier. You also may be asking them about what types of legislation they are putting forward. In 2017, we saw a bill introduced to Parliament, however unsuccessful, that tried to recognize the legal personhood of the Great Lakes. We saw the city of Toledo recognize the legal personhood of Lake Erie in 2019. However, that has been tested unsuccessfully in the courts. But we're seeing these types of rights of nature initiatives emerge for the Great Lakes. A bill was just introduced in the New York State legislature by a representative to recognize the inherent legal rights of the Great Lakes. And so I think at an individual scale, we all can become more aware and try and mobilize around these types of innovative legislation that will empower us to protect the beauty, the biodiversity of the Great Lakes that is inherent to our survival in addressing our current climate crisis.
Education and engagement, always a good thing. Gail, just got a few minutes left here, but maybe you could add something to that list as well. One thing an individual could do.
I love Kelsey's answer, by the way. Connect to the water. Where does your water come from? From the tap. How does it get to the tap? I have no idea. That's a typical answer. But know that big industry, the 19th and 20th century insults to the Great Lakes are really controlled, heavily controlled and regulated. It is every choice an individual makes to run that tap, the electrical energy that it requires to purify your water. What you pour down your drain gets back into the lakes, which is where you get your drinking water. And that every incremental bit now matters. It's a cumulative effort of every citizen, of every resident of the region, that everybody puts that little bit of poison down the drain. It ends up coming back to us, to the fish, to the wildlife, and to us. So understand that, well, I'm just one person, what can I do? If everybody had that attitude, we'd have mounds of waste everywhere because nobody would manage their waste. People try and deal with their waste reduction. Well, talk about water conservation and water protection as a cumulative requirement, because the big pipe discharge is not today's issue. Today's issue is what each and every one of us choose to do. So be responsible, be a steward of the region. These are glowing gems that can be seen from outer space, have that pride in their protection.
Mark, one idea from you?
Yeah, simple actions really do matter. So in the Great Lakes right now, 80% of the material that's washing up on the Great Lakes shoreline is plastic litter. There's just people throwing out food and beverage containers or cigarette butts on our beaches, and it's finding a way into our waterways and polluting our water. So how do we be better stewards of the environment? By just being responsible citizens and not throwing away simple consumer products into our environment. Pharmaceuticals is another great example. A lot of people just flush them down the drain. And unfortunately, they can't be treated in our wastewater systems, and those pharmaceuticals are getting into the Great Lakes. So be a responsible steward and take them back to a pharmacy and have them properly disposed. Those are just two very simple actions that people can take.
That is great advice from all three of you. Mark, we've got about a minute left here, and I want to give it to you because the Council of the Great Lakes region is partnering with us here at TVO to celebrate this 50th anniversary of something that needs a much better acronym, Mark. The Canada-United Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, or the CUSCLWUCA for short. CUSCLWUCA is, although it ends with aqua, so that's not bad, but what should our viewers and listeners know about this 50th anniversary that turns you on?
Well, I think just to highlight, I think some of the issues that Gail and Kelsey had raised and I have raised, just our connections to the Great Lakes. It's the world's largest freshwater system. It's one of the largest regional economies in the world. In fact, if this larger region was a country, it'd be the third largest economy in the world behind the United States and China. So I think through our partnership, we want to be able to remind people in Ontario and Canada just how fortunate we are to be connected to this wonderful natural resource, but also this massive economy, and really understand the challenges that we're going to be facing over the next 50 years through urbanization and development, more people coming here, hopefully developing more food for this region, but doing that sustainably, thinking about climate change and how climate change is going to impact our lakes and our systems. And so we really want to create a space where we can have this conversation in this celebratory year about our relationship with these lakes and how we think about our relationship with the lakes over the next 50 years.
Excellent, and we're happy to help you do that. From left to right on our screens, Kelsey Leonard, Gail Kranzberg, Mark Fisher. Great of all of you to spend some time with us here on TVO tonight, and happy anniversary, happy 50th anniversary to the Great Lakes Agreement.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The most recent report from the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, may have used some stark language when it said, effectively, it's now or never to limit global warming. But that also means some good news. We can still do something. Two of the lead authors of that report are Canadian, and they join us tonight. And as is our custom, we'll introduce our guests from furthest away to closest to our studio, starting in Vancouver, British Columbia, with Mark Jackard. He is Professor of Sustainable Energy at Simon Fraser University and the author of The Citizen's Guide to Climate Success, Overcoming Myths That Hinder Progress. And in Waterloo, Ontario, Sarah Birch, Canada Research Chair and Executive Director of the Interdisciplinary Centre on Climate Change at the University of Waterloo. And we're delighted to have you two back on our program for a timely discussion about this report that has just come out. And before you take us through it, you two, we thought it might be useful to play a clip from the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, reacting to this latest report. Sheldon, if you would.
This report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is a litany of broken climate promises. It is a file of shame, cataloguing the empty pledges that put us firmly on track towards an unlivable world. We are on a fast track to climate disaster.
That is a pretty stinging indictment from the UN Secretary General. And Mark Jackard, I wonder if you share his view.
Yes, I do. We need to be moving very fast, and we're not there yet. So, and we knew that from the other IPCC reports. Sarah and I are on the report that's looking at how to reduce emissions, but we knew that from the previous reports as they've come out. Humanity is still not doing nearly what it needs to do.
In which case, Sarah, could you start us off by highlighting some of the main findings of this newest report?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's lots of detail, lots of complexity in this report, but there's two really strong messages that come through that I think we need to pay particular attention to. The first is, of course, the fairly grim news that if we look back over the last 10 years, we've seen the largest average annual increase in greenhouse gas emissions that we've seen in human history. So that means that we are not on track to limit warming to 1.5 degrees to prevent the worst of climate change impacts. However, the flip side of that is that for the first time, we're seeing real evidence of sustained actual greenhouse gas reductions in some countries that aren't just a blip because of an economic recession or a public health crisis like COVID. So those are two messages that are at tension with one another, but come through very strongly.
And Mark, what would you say distinguishes this report from its previous ones?
Well, first of all, I really agree with how Sarah characterized it, because it's a stark warning, but she's also pointed out, which does come out, and those of us who worked on this for such a long time, that there are 20, 25 countries whose emissions are going down, and there are sectors in countries whose emissions are going down. But the message to us, at least in the area that I was working on, Sarah may have other things to add, but I'm on climate policy. So we have carbon taxes, we have regulations, sometimes government subsidies. We have those in some jurisdictions. They need to be far more stringent and increasing in stringency far more quickly. Some countries are doing better than others, but that's really the part of the report that I was involved in, was saying you don't get those fast reductions. Wherever you get the fast reductions, it's because of policies like that. Countries just setting targets it doesn't help us at all. And Canada has a history of that, where we've set targets but haven't implemented the policy. So our big message from this IPCC report is to really catalog the places on the planet where people put in the right policies and got those kind of effects that Sarah's talking about, which is good news if we can get others to be doing that.
We'll come back later in our conversation to how well Canada is or isn't doing on some of the things that you would like to see us doing. But again, Sarah, why don't you take us through what, in your judgment, are the main takeaways of this report in terms of what we need to be doing now? Recommendations, please.
Right. So the main insight is that, as Mark alluded to, we need immediate, accelerated, and very deep reductions in greenhouse gas emissions in all sectors and in all regions to hold on to that 1.5 degree target. Again, the flip side, though, is that we have evidence of solutions in all sectors. So there are some sectors that are easier to abate, where we have very ready technologies and lots of solutions at our disposal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by at least half by 2030. So that's that shorter term goal. And we're seeing evidence of those. So, for instance, in building them to retrofitting existing buildings, and of course, new buildings as well, to a much higher standard of efficiency. Of course, moving away from natural gas for heat and towards renewable energy. Another bit of good news from this report, evidence that the seeds are planted of this deeper transition, is that we're seeing a plummeting in the cost of really crucial renewable energy technologies. So solar coming down by 85%, wind by 55%, and lithium-ion batteries, which are a really important, piece of the puzzle, down by 85% as well. So in many cases, those technologies already exist to get us at least a large portion of the way we need to go.
Mark, do you want to build on that answer in terms of telling us how we're going to get the carbon out of the atmosphere?
So I agree with what Sarah said, and I think we have to remember that in different places on the planet, we may do other things as well, not just renewables. And I think she would agree. I mean, Ontario refurbishing nuclear power to some extent, that happening in other directions. Also, where we might still, regions that are well endowed with fossil fuels and that might still use those fossil fuels can actually capture the carbon while they convert it to hydrogen that we can use, or to electricity. So those things are, and we can talk more about that if you want, but carbon capture and then burying it in deep underground is something that we're already doing, and we may end up doing more of that.
Yeah, by all means follow up on that if you would, because people hear this expression carbon capture and storage all the time. I'm not sure, A, they know what it means, or B, how it actually happens. Help us with that.
Okay, so a coal-fired power plant in Ontario, when you had them, instead of closing them or converting to using wood, you could have captured the CO2, which is maybe 6% of the flue gas going up the pipe. So you'd have a way to separate the CO2 from that gas, and then you can send it in pipelines, and you can literally bury it underground in deep saline aquifers that are way below the freshwater aquifers. So we're doing that around the world already. We know the technology, we know the cost. Scaling it up would be pretty difficult, which is why I lean more towards the renewables, as Sarah does. But what the report also said was, gee, actually we're at 420 parts per million. The whole problem is we already put too much stuff up in the atmosphere, and nature's not going to take it down fast enough. So we should be extracting carbon from the atmosphere and then burying that underground. And so we call that carbon dioxide, direct air capture is a term for that. So we actually have technologies now, they're just in their infancy, but that would capture CO2 and then do the storage that I'm talking about. And all of this is with known technologies, some of them that are 100 years old. But it'll be expensive. But the point of this latest IPCC report was to say, we need to be doing this even if you don't want to use coal anymore. And the report said, well, we shouldn't have unabated coal. And by unabated, they meant capture the CO2 if you still have a coal plant. But they were also saying, we just have to get CO2 out of the atmosphere now. There's way too much up there, so we're going to need this technology. And
a quick follow-up with you, Mark. It really is feasible to have machines pulling carbon out of the atmosphere? I mean, you say it's 100. Some of these ideas go back 100 years, but this sounds pretty space age.
Right. So the 100-year-old one is, you can take coal. The Germans did it even in the Second World War and convert it into a synthesis fuel that you then convert all the way to hydrogen and capture the carbon. So, and they, the Germans had to scale that up in the Second World War because they couldn't get to oil. So the technology's well known. But extracting carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, well, I mentioned where you do it sort of mechanically. And so in Vancouver, there is, outside of Vancouver in Squamish, there's carbon engineering, an investment that Bill Gates was really originally involved in. And they're in the process of making major investments right now. And that is to, you basically take air and you run it through a fan, and then you have a chemical reaction to separate the CO2, the carbon dioxide, from the other gases. And that's tricky, right? Because the carbon dioxide is only at 400 parts per million. So it's a tiny percentage in the air that's coming through. And so these things will use a lot of energy as well. So we're trying to set them up where they can use surplus wind, like build one in Texas or Kansas, or surplus energy of some kind. There's one going in Iceland, and that's going to use, I think, the surplus hydropower they have. So you need energy to do it. So you really want to be doing what Sarah said. You want to be going to renewable energy for 90% of the solution here. But we do need to do the carbon capture, and there are technologies that we can do it with it. But they're not totally proven on scale up. So there's lots of work to do.
Gotcha. All right, Sarah, let me get you, if I can, to focus on the just released Canadian budget, in which there were emissions reduction plans in the budget. The federal government did introduce an investment tax credit to encourage carbon capture and storage. Let me get your take on how well you think that budget will get us to where we need to go.
Well, listen, I think there's strong appeal behind the use of carbon capture and storage to both as sort of an emergency measure to deal with the greenhouse gas emissions that are coming from fossil fuel extraction and combustion that we can't get ourselves out of. And in countries like Canada that, of course, economically rely or historically have rely so significantly on the oil and gas sector, those are appealing. But what worries me about carbon capture and storage and carbon dioxide removal coming to dominate our conversation and our spending is that it's the real reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, transitioning our supply away from fossil fuels and towards renewables, but also reducing our demand for those fossil fuels through building efficiency, through moving away from single occupancy vehicles and towards active transportation, building our communities so that they're more compact and complete so that we don't have to travel so far to get from work to recreation to services, this kind of thing. These are the real reductions that both ratchet down greenhouse gas emissions and offer an incredible menu of what we call co-benefits, of other benefits to our public health, improved air quality, cleaner water, richer nature, opportunities for justice and equity in our communities that are part of what I would call a more fully sustainable or low carbon resilient community, not simply one that is lower carbon.
So if I can use this analogy, Sarah, which I hear frequently from policy people, things like a greater commitment to renewables is a more upstream solution, whereas carbon capture and storage is a more downstream solution, and upstream solutions are better. Is that fair to say?
They offer a much broader range of benefits to people, to communities. They start to uncover the deeper drivers of emissions that have gotten us here in the first place. They tackle sort of the root causes of the problem. So I think they offer a lot more in terms of, bringing into being the healthy, sustainable, biodiverse, livable communities that we might collectively be aiming for. So there isn't just, we don't just have one thing on our list of objectives in our communities across Canada and around the world. Greenhouse gas emissions are absolutely crucial to tackle to avoid the worst of climate change impacts, but there's more that we want.
Mark, what was your take on how well the budget did what you think needs to be done?
So I want to say, and this is a fun contrast for Sarah and I, because she works in the area of urban design and livability, and I really agree with and respect a lot of the work and what they did on the IPCC with that. I'm a bit more in the energy system, and so I'll tend to point out when Sarah says, when she just did, she said, we'll have more active transportation, which I agree with, and we'll have cities built so that there's mixed use and you're not having to walk as much and more energy efficient. But even when I look around the world at this, where we've had success in that, in Scandinavian cities, for example, you'll see that they are moving rapidly to fuel switching. And so what I liked about the federal policy, what I would emphasize, is they're finally putting in something I've been calling for, and I've been hounding ministers about this for decades, whether it was liberal or conservative governments, was to put in a policy that forces the auto industry to stop saying we think we're going to make a lot of electric cars, and instead to actually say your percentage sales of electric cars needs to rise over time, or you're paying a penalty of $20,000 per car. And that means you're going to have to figure out a way to, maybe you're going to charge a little bit more money for the expensive gasoline car in order to subsidize electric cars so that their price is cheaper and they're accessible to more Canadians. And that's a policy that California put in 10 years ago. British Columbia and Quebec have copied it, and I was thrilled to see that the federal government has copied that policy, or has committed to copy it, and now they're doing, and while they're doing it, though, what I'm saying to them is, while they're designing it, I'm saying, so you don't need to talk to the auto industry. Here are all the different things they're going to tell you why it's not possible, but it's actually possible and is happening, so you don't need to talk to them. The policy's been implemented elsewhere. I was thrilled to see that. It means that in a place like where Sarah lives in Waterloo, yes, maybe you'll have better urban form and transportation, like the transit line they've put in, but people are still going to use cars, and so those cars need to be zero emission.
Sarah, you're good with this policy take as well, I presume?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree that it's a really important step forward. And I would say, one of the things that I found most fascinating in this IPCC assessment report was that on the one hand, the report found that individual choices are responsible for an enormous portion of our emissions, 40 to 70%. However, individuals are locked into high carbon pathways. If we don't have a range of affordable electric vehicles as options, if we don't have convenient and accessible active or mass transit infrastructure, don't have buildings built to extremely high efficiency standards that are off natural gas, et cetera. If we don't have access to those options, our hands are tied. And so the potential for individual choice to move us, onto these low carbon pathways has to be unleashed by these collective decisions that our elected officials, that our politicians and decision makers make on our behalf. And exactly what Mark describes is one important ingredient in that decision.
Well, Sarah, this is a bit off the path, but I'm curious as to your reaction to this anyway. Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, made an announcement a week or so ago I guess, crowing about a bunch of things. Number one, all the money Ontario was putting into subsidizing new electric vehicle production in numerous locations, actually, around the province. And number two, the fact that EV sales had gone up significantly during the last 4 years in Ontario, and he was taking credit for it. I wonder whether you think he's entitled to, given that the first couple of years he was in power, he ripped out all the charging stations that the previous government had started to build.
I think it's a bit of a stretch to claim credit for that. I think EVs are finally taking off because of the evolution of the technology. There's less of this range anxiety that folks have had for a long time. There's a wider variety of models available, and some of those are in more affordable brackets. So I do think that the move towards increased EV manufacturing in Ontario is a really important one to ensure that those folks whose jobs were, and livelihoods were reliant on the manufacture of typical internal combustion engine vehicles, moving those folks towards the jobs in producing EVs will be a really important aspect of a just and inclusive transition here in Ontario, for sure.
Mark, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. So the budget, I guess, was a giveth. I want to know your impressions of the taketh away. And on that score, we're talking about building the Trans Mountain Pipeline, which the current federal government still supports, and the approval of Baie du Nord, this Quebec oil project off the shores of Newfoundland and Labrador, which again doesn't sound consistent with a government that is really serious about reducing the effects of climate change. What was your view?
Right. So, and this is where Sarah and I may differ. I don't know, but I can give you. I have to give you the short version. Basically, I can explain, and I do this in various venues, how if I or you or Sarah were Prime Minister of Canada, an incredibly diverse, huge federal system in which provinces have control over energy, and in which some provinces are wealthier than others and some have fossil fuel endowments. They have a lot of oil or oil sands or coal. How it would be very difficult, and you may have to make compromises. You may say, I'm going to come in with aggressive climate policy, but it's going to be hard to say to people in Newfoundland, oh, yeah, I know, as long as we're not yet, and Doug Ford hasn't helped with this, which is he fought the carbon price that's important. If we are not moving quickly to electric vehicles or hydrogen vehicles yet, then oil will be produced somewhere on the planet. Though I'm an energy economist, the oil markets equilibrate. It will be produced somewhere. So it's very difficult for a prime minister, even when he's trying to move rapidly forward with reducing our oil consumption, to say that I'm not going to let this region of the country take an opportunity to produce some oil for this global oil market. And likewise, to say to a region like Alberta, even though energy economists like Andrew Leach at U of Alberta, others I know, have said really the purpose of the Trans Mountain Pipeline won't really increase oil production, but it'll get a better price for Albertans. They won't have to sell oil through the United States at a discount. It's pretty hard for a prime minister to say, I'm going to do those things. Now let's get into a big national battle that will probably take away our energies from climate policy. So that's my short version, and I don't want to justify it totally, but I'm shocked sometimes when some of my colleagues don't understand that if they were prime minister, they might have to make some different decisions, because it's part of compromise in a democracy with different points of view.
Okay, Sarah, your turn to weigh in on that one.
Mark might be surprised that I actually, I agree in large part that there are really tough decisions to be made about how we supply the fossil fuels that we still do need. I would just say that we also do need to look ahead and acknowledge the reality that this may become a stranded asset 30 years from now. And this is a worrisome state of affairs, that building new fossil fuel infrastructure, difficulty of the decision aside, have and have not provinces aside, which it's hard to set those aside. Those are the realities of decision making in the Canadian context. But we know that ultimately, to keep 1.5 degrees within reach, we have to move away from the extraction and combustion of fossil fuels. And so in the longer term, or in the medium term, this may become one of those stranded assets.
In which case, in our last couple of minutes, I'd like a minute from each of you on one thing people watching or listening to this can do starting today and into the future That'll help us get to where we need to go to. Mark, go ahead.
Get rid of gasoline and increasingly even diesel. Like say you buy a diesel pickup truck. The electric are coming on strong. There's even biofuel options. But the biggest thing would be to get a ZEV, a zero-emission vehicle, and do it the way I first got a zero-emission vehicle, is buy it with some friends. Or do what another friend of mine did, is buy a second-hand one.
Gotcha. Sarah, your one takeaway?
Yeah, well, I think we have different roles to play here, Mark and I, and I think that that climate change is less a technical problem than it is a social and a political problem. So my single most important recommendation, although I think that Mark's are right up there as well, would be to vote and talk about it. So, we're part of a really powerful conversation right now about how to move faster, about what responsibility we bear, finding common ground, finding shared values that we want to sort of bring into being, and what we want Canada to look like 30 years from now. So you need to write letters, you need to make phone calls, you need to vote when you have the opportunity, so that the collective decisions can be made that can unshackle us from these high carbon pathways and keep that 1.5 degree target within reach.
You may not have seen it, but he gave you a big thumbs up on that incident.
Can I just add that I agree completely, and it's pretty important in Ontario right now. And one of the things that I talk about in the book of mine that you promoted was strategic voting. Really make sure that the least sincere politicians, that they don't get elected because you split your vote in other ways. Now, Sarah might not agree with that, but her point about voting, I agree with completely. Thanks for a chance to weigh in there.
Great to have you two on our program tonight. Mark Jackard, Sarah Birch, always appreciate your visits to TVO, even virtually. Take good care, you two.
Thanks for having us.
And that is the agenda for Thursday, April 14th, 2022. Tomorrow, with the Good Friday holiday, we'll give way to the world broadcast premiere of the TVO original, Tripping the Bruce. It's a 3-hour documentary that takes viewers on a tour by sailboat up the rugged coast of the Bruce Peninsula and the gorgeous waters of Lake Huron. Starting time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time on TVO, or you can catch it on our spiffy revamped website, tvo.org, on our YouTube channel, and all of TVO's streaming services. Not to be missed. I'm Steve Paikin. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at tvo.org, and we'll see you back here on Monday.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.